for TVN for inviting me here today. What a fantastic day this has been. It's my first time in Poland, and I've learned a couple of things already. So, number one is that last is apparently first. Is that correct? So actually being on last is a good thing, right? Or am I just being told this because I am on last? The second thing I've learned is in the UK, the toilets have a picture of a man or a picture of a woman, so you know which toilet to go in. Here, there is a red circle for the ladies and a green triangle for the men. Is that everywhere or just here? Everywhere. It's much easier if you go for pictures. So my name's Matt Hill. I'm the Research and Planning Director for ThinkBox. ThinkBox is the trade marketing body for TV in the UK, and we conduct lots of research into how TV works, how advertising works, and our mission is to help agencies, to help advertisers to get the best out of TV. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a particular part of TV. I'm going to be talking to you about sponsorship. And a recent piece of research that we ran last year to build a better understanding of how sponsorship of TV programs can drive a really powerful effect for brands. So there's three core things really that we wanted to know with this piece of research. We wanted to understand about the mechanics of this kind of advertising. How exactly do they work? How do they drive improved brand affinity, which in turn drives market share growth? Secondly, what can you expect them to deliver for your business? We wanted to look at really thorough evidence to find out the kind of impact in brand health that you can achieve from doing these kind of sponsorships. And then finally, how do you get the most out of them? So to do this, we had two different research techniques. We worked with two different partners. For the first part, to understand the mechanics of program sponsorship and how they work, we partnered with a company called House 51, who specialise in psychology, and they look at everything through the lens of behavioural science to build an understanding of how they actually drive effects. Then for the second part, we worked with a company called YouGov, who collect a huge amount of data on brand perception in the UK. But I'm going to start off by talking about the psychology of how brand partnerships, of how sponsorship actually drives effects. So we came at it from the point where we had sort of three theories on how they worked. And the first one was rooted in this point here, really, which is that although when we work in advertising and in marketing, we like to think that people spend a lot of time thinking about our brands. The reality is they don't. Brands just aren't important to the average consumer, to the average person. What's important to people is their jobs, their friends, their family, their interests. They don't really care about brands. But one thing that is important to them is their favourite TV shows. Because TV is a really important pastime. It's a time when people often get to share time together. It's a time that they look forward to. It's the main way in which we relax. And so, as a brand, if you are sponsoring, if you are partnering with somebody's favourite TV programme, then you can start to play a more important role in their lives. So we wanted to think about, is this part of the reason on how sponsorship of a TV programme can drive improvements in brand health? And we look back at some past understanding of how relationships are formed. And what we found was that in psychology, there's this school of thought that basically the way that relationships are formed are related to how similar we are to each other. So you'll often find this, if you look at your own relationships, in terms of the people that you know the best, the people that you spend time with at work, as you get to know each other better, what you'll see is you'll start mirroring each other. You'll start to use the same language. You start to share the same kind of jokes. You even might find yourself starting to use the same kind of body language. And this is in part, the closer we are, the more similar to each other, then the stronger the relationship is. So we wanted to see how sponsorship could start to impact on this relationship that consumers have with brands. And we also found that this relationship and the way that relationships form can be applied between brands and consumers as well. So within this study, we looked at a number of programs that had a particular sponsor, and we started to look at the difference in perception of these brands between viewers of the program and non-viewers of the program. So for this example, we're looking at Foster's, which is it's a lager, it's a beer, and it sponsored a comedy strand on Channel 4. So it was partnering with all of their comedy shows. And we looked at the difference in the attributes that people applied to Foster's as a brand compared with viewers of the programme versus non-viewers of the comedy strand. And what we saw was that there's this huge uplift in likeness for people who are viewers of this programme that's sponsored by Foster's to see it as being laid back, loyal, cheeky, likeable, approachable. All these personality statements that you'd associate with the programme, with the comedy strand itself, were rubbing off on Foster's as a brand. But when we took this to the next phase, what was really interesting is that when we compared Foster's in terms of its personality traits and compared that against the personality traits that people apply to themselves, we found that viewers were much more likely to be in line in terms of their personality traits with how they perceived Foster's to be as non-viewers were. And often I think we test for this kind of thing in research. We all say, this is a brand for me. How strongly do you agree that this is a brand for me? I think what's probably more interesting question to ask is this a brand like me? Does this brand share the same kind of personality as me? Is it got the same kind of values? And through partnering with people's favourite shows, we can start to bring brands closer together in terms of their personality attributes. Now, we really saw this in the qualitative research. We spoke to a lot of people. We spoke to them about why they enjoyed watching these shows and how they felt about the brands that were sponsoring them. Remember, people don't really think much about these relationships. It's not something that's important to them. But just listen to the language that they use. So we're going to see a couple of clips here. One is a man, who one of his favourite shows is a quiz show, and it's a sort of sports quiz show, and it's been sponsored by Right Guard, which is a deodorant. And then the second one is a lady, and her favourite show is Coronation Street, which is a soap opera in the UK, and that's sponsored by Compare the Market, which is an insurance aggregator site where if you want to buy insurance, you'll type in Compare the Market, and you compare the cost of different insurance brands. Just talking you through that, so hopefully this makes a bit more sense.
Relatively calm, I think, laid back, and I've had to have a little laugh, whether it's in work, or sometimes we can have a laugh. It's quite a small office, so there's only 3 of us. I think we kind of bounce off each other. The League of Their Own and myself, I think we share quite a few things in common, really. That I think it's a laid-back approach, maybe a little bit sporty as well, and just like to have a laugh and get along, really. Don't take themselves too seriously. So Right Guard reaffirms to me that they have a sporty brand, and they're trying to target that specific audience. But also the audience through the advert, that sort of the guys that don't take themselves too seriously, everyday guys really, that just go to work and go home and do things with their mates around. For me, everyone can relate to it, because through the adverts, everyone knows that in the office that sort of thing goes down, where everyone has like a half an hour or 15 minutes, bit of to and fro at each other, a bit of banter, a bit of a laugh. So I think the advert is really suited.
Fun, bubbly, hard-working, kind, lovable, like family as well, very much a family person. I'll do anything for them, one of those types of people. There'll be just lots going on, so they'll be very exciting, because you never know what's going to happen, so they'll be very curious. They'll be very determined person, and they'll love a good challenge. They'll love a good challenge, and every day won't be the same, so their life will be very hectic. it's just so funny. It really is like, you just watch it and you just know straight away Corrie's going to come on, and they all do different things, and it's just funny, isn't it? And because you've got them all on there, and obviously Corrie's like a family programme, it really links in with that feel to it. You know, the way they all are like mad, you just relate to it, and it's crazy. Very like family, like very family orientated, and I'll just say fun.
So it's probably quite tricky. There's some strong accents there from the UK as well. But hopefully you see the language that's coming through, and they're using the same language to describe themselves and to describe the programs, and then to describe the brand that's sponsoring it. And this is the power of it. So you've got something like Compare the Market. It's an insurance aggregator. Okay, it's a very cold, rational product. It's somewhere you go when you want to buy insurance. But through sponsoring Coronation Street, which that lady sees as it's a family show, that has become a family brand. And family is important to her. And so when she wants to go and choose her insurance, she'll go to that content outlet. It will be the first site that comes to her mind. And that's how it's driving success. That is how the sponsorship is driving this increased brand affinity. So we looked at the 7 partnerships, and we looked at how good this fit was in terms of the brand personality and the people we tested their own personality. And what we found was a really strong relationship, that the closer the match in terms of the brand traits, the personality traits, the program and the brand, then the more likely they were to consider it. That's a really strong correlation. So the second thing that we wanted to look into is something that we've talked about a lot today, and it's the fact that we don't think from a rational point of view. We are not rational beings. When it comes to how we make our decisions, we rely on our gut instinct. If you think about it, when you are in a supermarket, you've got 60,000 different brands that you could be choosing from. Do you go around making a rational decision off every single purchase? No, you don't. You go around and you purchase off the back of your gut instinct. There's a huge school of thought that backs this up. The second thing is about how we know that brands grow. And again, we've talked about this today. It's about the Byron Sharp school of thought. It's about the need for us as brands to build mental availability. The more positive and the stronger associations that we have with brands, then the more likely we are to be the brand that gets chosen at the point that somebody is in market. But I think often sponsorship can be seen and perceived to be a form of advertising that isn't conducive to really building these kind of memory structures. It's more limited than a 30-second spot. There's not as much that you can communicate. It's much more a softer way of connecting with consumers. But what we found is that actually there's a huge number of ways in which you can start to build mental availability. By linking your brand to the program, you start to borrow all the assets of the program. By linking your brand, your sponsorship bumpers to the rest of your advertising, you start to build on all the memory structures that you have through the rest of your advertising. You start to build on associations that could be down to the time of day that the program's on. So if you're always on a Saturday night, you will start to be associated with Saturday night. And again, when we went out and we spoke to our respondents about this, we really saw some of this coming through.
Britain's Got Talent has a huge variety of performances. AO are the same with their adverts. There's lots of variety in there, lots of different things going on. It's quite light-hearted, it's quite fun, quite engaging, and I've seen that they've got historic Britain's Got Talent performers actually in the advert.
And it's sort of like a bit of a continuation of the programme. It captures your attention and sort of engages you. You want to continue watching.
So the sense in our advert and first dates, I think, fits hand in hand. In that it's people ultimately when they're together on holidays, it's a good show for a holiday company to advertise on. You can see the link.
And I think it's showing, we do a range of makeup, you know, you've got the black women in there and the white women as well, so it appeals to all again. Because they're always doing the fashion, they're doing the makeup, they're doing the makeovers, big, small, black, white, it's that diverse thing, isn't it? And I think that's what Boots are trying to say.
And I think Foster's, I knew that it was the other guys drinking Foster's on the beach, and it's always sort of in the back of my mind that that's what they do, and when I think of Foster, I think of them straight away, so yeah, it's stuck.
Ever since I've seen the Meerkats adverts, now I always go through, compare the market for my home insurance, travel insurance, car insurance, anything I need, I'll go through them because of the Caddy toy that you could get and the other promotions they do. For example, the 2-for-1 cinema tickets. It's just something that firstly I find really funny, quirky, gimmicky, and secondly the promotion as well. I want to be part of that.
I don't think the Dutch advert sits particularly well with Dave's brand, whereas the intro ads I think do fit, because it was quite sort of comical, a bit sort of quirky, whereas I think the advert was completely different.
It's all about that feel-good factor. I mean, it might be feel good in relation to pampering yourself. It might be feeling good in relation to make sure you put your suntan lotion on to protect yourself. It might feel good, you know, you've got your perfume on, you smell lovely, so you feel great. It's all about that feel-good factor, but I suppose in the different areas.
So this is really interesting, but how do you test for this? How do you see this come through in terms of research? So there's a couple of ways. Number one is we see that you can really drive these associations by making the links as strong as you can. So where there was a really good fit between the program and the actual sponsor link, so the sponsor bumpers were reflecting what the program was about, we saw that there was massively, heightened impact. And we also saw where there was a link back to the rest of the brand advertising. Again, we could see this heightened impact. But really, when you want to test for mental availability, a lot of this is happening below the surface. It's not a rational choice. It's not something that you're explicitly aware of. And so in order to understand this, what we wanted to look at was using an implicit test. So rather than just look at the degree to which people are likely to agree with these positive brand statements about the different brands that we tested, also what we wanted to look at was how fast were they able to agree them. So how quickly did they make their decision? And again, comparing non-viewers of the program versus viewers, we saw a real jump. So everything moves from this sort of bottom left-hand corner up into the top right-hand corner. So people have positive associations and they find it very easy to agree. And this is what's happening at the point of purchase. They have to make a decision. There is a product range in front of them and they're choosing a brand. They're going for the one that is the easiest choice for them to make, the one that's most automatic. And so we can clearly see that program partnerships and sponsorships are building this mental availability. Then the final thing that we wanted to touch on was this point of the fact that often a lot of advertising is not just about the actual message that you're getting across or about the way in which you're communicating. It's purely to be seen to be spending a lot of money on your product. It's purely as a signal to say, I think this is good. I think this is a worthwhile product. And I'm spending money advertising it to you. And it's called the costly signalling. So a great example of this is the peacock that you see here. So Charles Darwin, when he was coming up with his theory of evolution, he looked at the peacock and he went, what the hell? Why on earth has this animal got this ridiculous, extravagant tail? How does this fit in to my theory on survival of the fittest? And that the fittest animals are the ones that survive. How does that help the survival of that bird? Surely, if he's running away from a predator, that is not going to help him get away. But the reality is that the peacock has this incredible tail because it is so successful. It has this tail as a sign of its fitness. It is known in zoology as an advertising male. It is advertising how much it can afford to spend to peahens to say, hey, look at me, look at this tail, look how fit I am. And that is exactly what we're doing when we're buying the best spot in the biggest rating program on TV. You're sending out a costly signal. You are saying, this is a good brand, this is a good product, look how successful we are, we must be good. And sponsorship really works on this. Sponsorship is perceived to be more expensive than spot advertising. So it sends off a really costly signal that this must be a good brand if it's going to be associated with these shows. I'm going to skip on a bit because I'm running out of time. I won't play this video. But so those are the three areas in which we saw what the mechanics of sponsorship are, how it drives success. I want to go through now just some of the numbers in terms of the more quantitative, evidence-based study on what you can expect it to deliver. So we worked with a company called YouGov. Every day they are out doing interviews across a huge range of brands. So they are collecting up, over the last 10 years, really interesting time series data on changing brand health levels. At the same time, they're also doing a survey on what people are watching on TV. So it's easy for us to see how many people are viewers and what's their perception of the brands and how does that compare against non-viewers, and we can look at how it trends over time. We're looking at a number of standard measures, so we're looking at, I'm pressing the wrong button, we're looking at reputation, quality, awareness, consideration. Sometimes we're grouping these together just to give us an average score, to give us an average indication of how successful it was. And all the time what we're doing with these charts is we're looking at the difference in the perception between the viewers of a program that's sponsored versus people who aren't viewers of those programs. So it's the gap is how much more likely are viewers to have these stronger considerations for these brands. So the first chart is looking at difference between brands that have low awareness versus brands that have high awareness. And the one that you really want to look at is this one over in the corner here, where we're looking at, for brands with low awareness, the impact that by sponsoring a program can have in your actual overall awareness. That's a 17 percentage point uplift in terms of the number of people that are aware of your brand. That's a huge, huge impact. It just is an incredible way of building exposure. Here's an example where we actually took this. So it's this is a program. Each grey bar is a time when the program was on, and what you can see is that the awareness of that brand is growing. Then it stops, and then you go to the next series, which is the grey bar, and the awareness starts to grow again. So as you maintain your relationship, you start to build up your awareness series by series. Here we're looking at cutting up all the different types of partnership into ones that were very high frequency versus low frequency. And this is interesting because frequency is often deemed to be a bad thing. Surely, you know, if you're getting too much frequency, then you're going to be driving wastage. People are going to get tired of it. They're going to have seen it too much. They've got it, they know it, it's a waste of money. But what we see is that frequency is incredibly important. In fact, the high frequency ones are much better at driving uplift in consideration, in perception of how high quality that brand is. So don't be afraid of going for something that's very high frequency. That can really drive effect. As we talked about before, the creative fit is key. So make sure that your sponsorship bumper links back to the program. If it doesn't link, it won't work so well. Integration is important, so you can just do a standard sponsor where you're doing bumpers, but more than that, if you can start to build in your brand with the program as a whole, if you can run bespoke spot advertising that can amplify the link, what we see is that the more you integrate, the stronger the impact is. Also what's interesting is that we see that the longer running sponsorships drive more of a brand effect than the shorter running sponsorships. So those that have been on air for over a year, over 3 years, drive a much better response than the ones that are only going for under a year. And finally, I think a really important point is that these effects are long-lasting. So what we were able to do is we looked at the point in time where a partnership and sponsorship had stopped, and then looked at how long it took for these uplifts in brand health measures to fade away. And while there was a gradual decay in terms of their awareness of seeing advertising for these brands, their perception of these brands remained at 80% of the level they were before, 6 months after the sponsorship had finished. So these are really long-lasting brand effects. So that's it. Please do get in touch if you've got any questions. I'd summarise in just saying that the power behind these types of partnerships is that they work very implicitly. They make people feel that their brand is closer to them personality-wise. They build mental availability, and they act as a really powerful, costly signal that say, this is a brand you can trust. This is a brand that is quality. And so, you know, when you're next thinking about a route, consider sponsorship as a way forward. That's it for me. Thank you very much.